Welcome to Anime Recaps. In this video, we will explain Jujutsu Kaisen. This anime tells the story of Yuta Akatsu gaining control of an extremely powerful, cursed spirit and getting enrolled in the Tokyo Prefectural Jujutsu High School by sorcerers to help him control his power and keep an eye on him. What's the complete story of this anime? Let's find out in Jujutsu Kaisen. Jujutsu Kaisen begins by showing the deplorable conditions in Japan, where the number of deaths from mysterious causes and cases of missing persons has risen sharply in the country and has been recorded at 10,000 cases per year. Most of them are caused by the curses, a race of spiritual beings whose primary desire is to bring harm to humanity and are shown as gruesome monsters. Suffering, regret, humiliation, or negative human feelings are the main sources of a curse. In public places such as schools and hospitals, the general public is accustomed to keeping sacred objects to expel the curses. However, instead of getting rid of the curses, these sacred objects invite the curses to come. In public fear and panic, a group is working hard to eradicate the curses from this world. They are referred to as Jujutsu sorcerers. Jujutsu sorcerers are people who control the flow of cursed energy in their bodies, allowing them to use it as they please and also reduce its release. The scene then switches and shows the atmosphere at a high school in Sendai, where a student named Yuji Itadori takes a sacred object from his school. Together with his seniors, Setsuko Sasaki and Takeshi Igachi, Yuji, a member of the Occult Research Club, intends to research the sacred object. At the same time, a young man named Megumi Fushiguro is seen at Yuji's school picking up the sacred object. Megumi is a Jujutsu sorcerer who is studying in the first year at the Tokyo Prefectural Jujutsu High School. When Megumi passed Yuji, he immediately felt the aura of the curses emanating from within Yuji's body. Megumi rushed to call Yuji and tried to warn him, but Yuji was in a hurry to get to the hospital, thus ignoring Megumi. Yuji turns out to have to visit his grandfather, who is being treated at the hospital, where the grandfather is the only family he has. In a dying condition, the grandfather said his last message to Yuji, which was for him to use his power to save many people, so that when he died, many people would surround him. After conveying his will to Yuji, the grandfather finally breathed his last in his peaceful sleep. That night, Megumi then met Yuji at the hospital and immediately asked him the whereabouts of the sacred object. Without thinking, Yuji immediately handed the box to Megumi. But after being checked by Megumi, it turns out that the sacred object contained in it has disappeared. Yuji immediately remembered that Sasaki and Igachi must have brought the sacred object because they would do occult research at school. Megumi and Yuji rushed over there. Meanwhile at school, Sasaki and Igachi desperately open the seal of a sacred object, which turns out to be a rotten finger talisman. Immediately, the curses started arriving at the school and immediately attacked them. Considering the situation too dangerous, Megumi then asked Yuji to get out of there while he would fight the curses alone. With his abilities as a Jujutsu sorcerer, Megumi could defeat several monsters, but he was overwhelmed enough that the other monsters caught Sasaki and Igachi. Yuji, who didn't just stay silent, immediately came to help even though he only relied on his physical strength. Yuji manages to save Sasaki and Igachi, but then a stronger and fiercer monster appears, instantly knocking Megumi down with a single groan. Yuji then put all his strength into saving Megumi because he remembered his grandfather's message. However, the curses can't be defeated just by relying on physical strength, so Yuji is forced to swallow a rotten finger talisman that Sasaki gave him and hopes to get the strength to defeat the monster, according to Megumi's previous explanation. Sure enough, Yuji could overthrow the monster with just one hit. However, due to his reckless actions, the spirit fragment of the owner of the cursed finger now resides in Yuji's body. Shortly after, a man named Satoru Gojo came there to monitor the situation. Gojo is a Jujutsu sorcerer who's working as a teacher at the Tokyo Prefectural Jujutsu High School. Gojo was very surprised when he found out that Yuji Itadori had swallowed a rotten finger talisman that the Jujutsu sorcerers had been looking for. Even more surprising, Yuji could withstand the curse, which was a very rare phenomenon. Before, there had never been an ordinary human who could control the cursed spirit that was very strong within his body. This indicates that Yuji Itadori is a special person. Yuji is then taken somewhere by Gojo. He explains to Yuji that the sacred finger that Yuji swallowed was the finger of Yomen Sukuna, the cursed king which the Jujutsu sorcerers successfully sealed. After being defeated, the fingers of Yomen Sukuna were dispersed into 20 pieces, and because the fingers were indestructible, the seal weakened even more. For now, the higher-ups of the Jujutsu sorcerer had managed to collect Yomen Sukuna's 6 fingers. However, swallowing Yomen Sukuna's finger is a serious offense and the culprit must be executed immediately because it is feared that the cursed king will rise by using Yuji's body. However, Gojo seemed to have other thoughts. He was planning to make Yuji swallow all of Yomen Sukuna's fingers. After that, Yuji would be executed because then, the cursed king would be completely eradicated and Jujutsu sorcerers wouldn't have to bother to seal him anymore. At least that's why Gojo will put forward to postpone the death sentence for Yuji. Gojo seems to think of another solution after knowing that Yuji can control the power of Yomen Sukuna inside his body. He also gave another finger to Yuji to swallow, and he was still able to control Yomen Sukuna's spirit very well. After that, Gojo took Yuji to Tokyo Prefectural Jujutsu High School, a special school to train novice jujutsu sorcerers like Megumi. Yuji will also be living in the dorm with Megumi. The next day, Gojo invites Megumi and Yuji to go to the Harajuku area, where they will welcome the arrival of a new student, a girl named Nobara Kujisaki. With the presence of Nobara, the number of first-year students is complete because only certain people can learn jujutsu. After a brief introduction, Gojo immediately ordered Nobara and Yuji to eradicate the curses in the Roppongi area because they were new students. Even though the curse who was guessing against her wasn't that strong, but because she was so cunning by using a boy as a hostage, Nobara had a hard time dealing with him. Yuji then quickly cuts off the monster's hand and manages to free the hostage, so Nobara can easily defeat the monster with the straw doll technique. She uses a straw doll, a weapon hammer and nails as her primary choice of combat. They both manage to complete the task. Sometime later, their school received an emergency request due to the appearance of a cursed womb on top of the prison building. Surprisingly, prisoners who do not master jujutsu can see the cursed womb. The cursed womb was apparently still able to evolve and was expected to become a cursed spirit of the highest level or, in other words, extremely dangerous. The cursed with the highest level should be handled by Jujutsu Sorcerer Grade 1 or Special Grade like Gojo. But because they were busy dealing with the other curses, the school was forced to send Megumi, Yuji and Nobara, who were still in Grade 4. When they got there, the cursed womb had evolved into the highest tier cursed spirit. The monster sends Nobara to another place with its power. So Megumi and Yuji must work together to face the monster. However, Yuji lost his hand in the middle of the fight and the two of them were very overwhelmed fighting against the monster. Yuji then asked Megumi to get out of there while he would try to face the monster alone, although it sounded impossible because the monster was a cursed spirit of the highest level. Yuji then asked the spirit of Yomen Sukuna to help him fight, but the spirit refused. However, seeing Yuji's strong determination to really want to defeat the monster, Yomen Sukuna finally decided to help him. With a little Yomen Sukuna's strength, Yuji could easily defeat the monster, who was also surprised to learn that the cursed king's spirit resided in the body of an ordinary young man. After defeating the monster, Yuji took the sacred finger belonging to Yomen Sukuna which was inside the monster's body and intended to switch bodies again with him. But because Yuji never gave a response, Yomen Sukuna is now freely controlling Yuji's body. Yomen Sukuna then purposely kills Yuji and challenges Megumi to a fight. When Megumi put all his strength and prepared to fight Yomen Sukuna, Yuji woke up and switched bodies again with Yomen Sukuna, but he fell and died. Yuji Itadori was declared physically dead, but Yomen Sukuna's soul was still in his body. In the subconscious, Yuji and Yomen Sukuna negotiated and dueled, which in the end was won by Yomen Sukuna, so Yuji had to comply with the conditions set by him. Yuji Itadori is finally resurrected, but Gojo decides to keep it a secret for the time being. Gojo seemed happy that Yuji had finally come back to life. After that, Gojo decided to train Yuji personally and would send him back to school when he had mastered the basics of jujutsu. Meanwhile, elsewhere, there is a special grade jujutsu sorcerer, a man named Suguru Gido, surrounded by the curses who ask him for advice to defeat other jujutsu sorcerers. Gido tells that two conditions must be met for them to win the battle against the jujutsu sorcerers. First, kill Satoru Gojo, the strongest jujutsu sorcerer, and second, make Yomen Sukuna who resides in Yuji Itadori's body as a partner. That night, a cursed spirit named Jogo then plans to attack Satoru Gojo first. Like jujutsu sorcerers who have grades, cursed spirits are also classified by grade according to their level of power, and Jogo is a very dangerous cursed spirit special grade. However, Jogo is not a difficult opponent for Satoru Gojo who is also a special grade jujutsu sorcerer. Even he also had time to do a teleportation technique to bring Yuji to the battlefield to teach Yuji Domain Expansion. Domain Expansion is the supreme ability of any jujutsu user. Jogo first uses Domain Expansion to fight Satoru Gojo. However, Gojo uses his flagship Domain Expansion technique, namely Unlimited Void. With this technique, he traps the target inside the Limitless. Once inside, he flooded them with endless information, rendering them immobile. Gojo managed to defeat Jogo, but his life was saved by another cursed spirit who was Jogo's partner named Hanami. Hanami and Jogo then fled while hiding their presence and managed to return to the hideout, where there was Gido and their leader, a cursed spirit named Mahito who had the appearance of a grown man and made an alliance with Gido. 1 month later, Mahito begins his plan by visiting a movie theater and killing 3 people. However, an eyewitness saw the incident, and he was a young man named Junpei Yoshino. It turns out that the 3 people killed by Mahito were delinquent students who often bullied Junpei at school, so he has indirectly helped Junpei. Since then, Junpei often follows Mahito and they become friends. In fact, Mahito deliberately approached Junpei because he wanted to make Junpei his pawn. Meanwhile, Gojo asks his junior, a grade 1 jujutsu sorcerer named Kento Nanami, to investigate the case. Gojo also asked Kento to invite Yuji so that he could study at the same time. Kento and Yuji then go to the crime scene and find clues about Junpei and Mahito's involvement, who deliberately left a trail because Mahito wanted to challenge them all. Kento then asked Yuji to investigate Junpei, while he looked for Mahito. After finding the location of Mahito's whereabouts, Kento immediately fought with him. Both of them are fighting to test the extent of each other's strength. Apparently Mahito has not been able to master jujutsu techniques, so it is quite overwhelming to face Kento. However, Mahito has a fairly tough physical resistance. In the end, the two of them were both quite badly injured. Elsewhere, Yuji gets close to Junpei and even befriends him. Junpei even invited Yuji to have dinner at his house with his mother. Their friendship is getting closer because they both have the same hobby. That night, when Junpei was sleeping, Mahito secretly placed Yomen Sukuna's cursed finger at Junpei's house, causing Junpei's mother to die. The next morning, Mahito came to see Junpei and instigated him by saying that someone deliberately placed Yomen Sukuna's sacred finger in his house. Junpei then thought that one of the sneaky students at his school had done this. Junpei, who is now filled with resentment and hatred, can finally use jujutsu techniques and everything is according to Mahito's plan. Yuji immediately went to Junpei to wake him up. They had time to fight, but Yuji refrained from using his strength excessively because he didn't want to kill Junpei. Yuji deliberately took Junpei's attack to wake him. However, Mahito arrives and turns Junpei into a cursed spirit instead. Yuji also had time to ask Yomen Sukuna for help to save Junpei, even recklessly offering his body to Yomen Sukuna in return. But Yomen Sukuna ignored Yuji's request. Meanwhile, Mahito was confused and wondered why Yomen Sukuna refused Yuji's offer to take over his body. It turns out that Mahito's real plan was to free Yomen Sukuna and offer the Cursed King to join him against the jujutsu sorcerers. On the other hand, Yomen Sukuna provoked Yuji to cultivate negative energy in him. Yuji's negative energy is getting bigger because he really wants to kill Mahito. Mahito then tries to enter Yuji's subconscious where Yomen Sukuna lives. But there, Mahito could only be silent because of the fear of seeing Yomen Sukuna's terrible power. Yomen Sukuna also firmly kicked Mahito out of there. Mahito and Yuji then get into a fight, where Kento finally arrives there to help Yuji. In a state of urgency, Mahito used the domain expansion technique and managed to trap Kento in it. Yuji, who is outside the area, tries to get in to save Kento's life, who is on the brink. But then, Yomen Sukuna appeared and could easily destroy Mahito's domain expansion technique. The seriously injured Mahito then rushes to escape, while Yuji collapses unconscious. Kento, who had reached his limit, could not catch up with Mahito, so Kento and Yuji finally returned to headquarters. Mahito, who had returned to his hiding place, then devised the next plan, where they would infiltrate Jujutsu High School and steal Yomen Sukuna's fingers stored there. A few days later, Jujutsu High School will have sparring, where 6 students from Tokyo Prefectural Jujutsu High will fight 6 students from Kyoto Prefectural High. At that moment, Gojo announced that Yuji was still alive and told him to join his friends. Elsewhere, Yoshinobu Gakugenji, as the principal of Kyoto Jujutsu High and also a member of Jujutsu higher-ups, ordered his students to kill Yuji Itadori. Yoshinobu is one of the higher-ups in Jujutsu who really wants to eliminate Yuji because Yomen Sukuna resides in his body. However, one of the students of Kyoto Jujutsu High, a young man named Itadori, was reluctant to follow the order. The battle begins with Yuji, who has to deal with Itadori, who is a grade 1 jujutsu sorcerer. Itadori has very strong physical strength and immediately beats Yuji down to his knees. Itadori thought that everything was over. However, Yuji finally got up because he wasn't as weak as people thought. Itadori then tries to judge Yuji by asking what type of woman he wants. Unexpectedly, they turned out to have a lot in common, and Itadori felt that Yuji was the true friend he had been looking for. Not long after, 4 students of Kyoto Jujutsu High came there and prepared to kill Yuji, but Itadori threw them all out and instead trained Yuji with all his heart because he had considered Yuji as his best friend. In the middle of the fight, the students were surprised by Hanami, a cursed spirit special grade who was Mahito's subordinate. Hanami and the curses will be tasked with distracting the jujutsu sorcerers, while Mahito will steal Yomen Sukuna's sacred finger. Itadori and Yuji finally fought against Hanami and immediately showed the results of their training. Itadori turns out to have the ability to switch places with whoever he wants, and it turns out that he can establish a solid and compact partnership with Yuji. Even so, the two of them still have trouble dealing with Hanami, until finally Gojo arrives. Seeing the arrival of the strongest jujutsu sorcerer, Hanami and the others immediately fled. However, Hanami was hit by an attack that destroyed part of his body. In the end, The sparring had to be stopped because of the incident, and Mahito apparently managed to steal Yeoman Sukuna's sacred finger and several other sacred objects. A few days later, the first-year students are back on a mission on a haunted bridge. Arriving there, Yuji and the others have to face off against 3 cursed spirits, one of whom is a manifestation of Yeoman Sukuna's sacred finger, the same monster born from the cursed womb some time ago. This time it was Megumi who would face the monster. At first, Megumi was overwhelmed by the monster. Still, when pressed, Megumi used the domain expansion technique, namely Chimera Shadow Green, where he managed to fill an area with thick fluid shadows and summon countless Shikigami from them, as well as utilize advanced manipulation of his shadows. Although not perfect, but Megumi was able to defeat the monster. Meanwhile, Yuji and Nobara are also able to defeat the other cursed. However, just as Megumi was about to take the sacred finger, Yeoman Sukuna emerged from Yuji's hand and absorbed the finger into his body. Having successfully completed their mission, Megumi, Yuji, and Nobara were finally recommended to be Jujutsu Sorcerers Grade 1 by To-Do, indicating that the 3 have been officially recognized as Jujutsu Sorcerers. The moral that can be learned from this anime is to try to eliminate negative feelings and thoughts from within us, because the bad thoughts, jealousy, pride, anger, hatred, and resentment we feel will indirectly invite bad things to come into our lives. If in the Jujutsu Kaisen anime these negative feelings will manifest into monsters, then in real life, those negative feelings may develop into physical and mental illnesses that we may not realize if all these illnesses originate from negative feelings and thoughts that we continue to cultivate within ourselves.